Hi everyone, Hyde here with another video. I have a whole bunch of other projects planned at the moment, but after Stray Kids' most recent release, which is certainly contentious amongst the fandom to say the least, I really wanted to share my thoughts and contribute to the overall discussion. Keep in mind these are just my preliminary thoughts on the 5-star album, and they will certainly evolve over time. I'll start by talking about the title song, S-Class, because I think that's where there's a lot to be said. And for the rest of the album, because it's pretty long, instead of talking about each track extensively, I'll split the album into 2 sections, and I'll talk about the overall trends across each section. And I'm also excluding the last 2 tracks, which are their mixtape and the Korean version of a Japanese song, because they've already been released and they're kind of tacked onto the album and don't really factor into the musical journey of the rest of the release. So without further ado, let's start with talking about the title song, S-Class. Okay, so I'm anticipating that this will be an unpopular opinion, but I really love the title S-Class, and it's definitely the strongest track on the album for my tastes. So let's jump in right into the juicy part, the beat switch up for the second verse. I personally really loved it. S-Class is certainly heavily rap focused compared to Stray Kids' other title tracks, so including a 90s retro hip-hop beat gave their exploration of hip-hop a different depth and allowed them to do more cool things rap-wise. The fills during the transitions were maximized to make the beat switch up really seamless, and enough elements of the second verse are foreshadowed earlier as to make it cohesive. I think Stray Kids were able to execute this concept with a lot of nuance and the typical Stray Kids audaciousness. I've seen some people online compare this track to nmixx or SM style switch-ups, but I honestly do not understand its comparison beyond the most superficial sense. Next level type switch-ups completely subvert the initial energy of the song, doing a complete 180 in terms of both composition and musical direction. The 90s hip-hop section in S-Class is more of a diversion of the track into a parallel path. The energy and structure are maintained, but placed in a different context. So moving on to discussing other parts of the track, my personal favorite section would definitely be the first verse with Hyunjin and Han's parts. The sparse, tight beat hits and the extensive use of silence create a really explosive yet restrained energy and shows 3ROCH's continued development as a producer. The bass-heavy chorus with super punctuated rap delivers this energy and concept throughout the entire track. I love the differences between each of the choruses, such as the muffled vocal production and delayed beat drop of the second chorus. And of course, the powerful rap in the bridge followed by the third chorus with its altered instrumental is really powerful, and I especially love the guitar riff that was snuck in. In terms of the track's few weaknesses, I'd say the intro with the whistling followed by Changbin's brief, intense rapping section is a bit on the nose and brash. And also, the pre-choruses are serviceable but nothing particularly notable. But all in all, this track has so many tasty tidbits and develops in such interesting ways. It's not amongst my very favorite Stray Kids titles, but it's certainly a solid and unique addition to their discography. So moving on to talking about the B-sides, I would say the first half of this album consists of Stray Kids' signature maximalist and energetic songs. It is comprised of the tracks Hall of Fame, Item, Super Bowl, and Top Line. Compared to previous Stray Kids releases, these tracks certainly have a stronger rap and hip-hop focus, but the EDM elements are still very central to all of their developments. So here's where some of my reservations with this comeback began. I would say that overall these tracks are not entirely cohesive and lack some of the precision and intentionality 3ROCH have begun developing in some of their most recent B-sides. So I would say that Top Line is most certainly the weakest of these tracks. The sample and beat used in the intro and chorus is pretty clunky and doesn't sound particularly harmonious. The transition into the trap beat in the verses and then the vocal pre-choruses are all a bit jarring, and it's hard to see a cohesive overall vision. It's a shame because Tiger JK's verse was really excellent, but it's wasted on a messy track which doesn't have a well-developed central idea. This feature would have also made more sense in a track which was fully committed to the hip-hop soundscape and was maybe a rap line only track. Instead, attempting to include too many disparate elements without any cohesive connections make the track a little bit confusing. Both Item and Hall of Fame also suffer from a lack of overall vision, but not nearly to the same extent as Top Line, as both tracks have some really cool elements propelling them forward. In item, the strongest sections are those with a distinctive video game type sample and a minimal trap beat, underneath some really excellent rap verses. And in Hall of Fame, there's a lot of cool elements packed at the very end of the song, especially during the breakbeat section. And the different rhythm motifs used throughout the song are combined and developed in interesting ways. However, in both of these tracks, I feel that not enough time was spent developing and exploring these cool elements, and awkward individual moments elsewhere in the track muddle the overall sonic concept and make the tracks sound a little bit hodgepodge. So one big example of this would be the Stranger Things-esque like retro synth in Hall of Fame is a bit jarring and out of place. So overall, I'd say these tracks are solid, but in no means perfect. The strongest track in this first half is certainly Super Bowl because it is the most cohesive and singular in its vision. The minimal beat with the heavy bass and distinctive instrumental creates a solid character for this track, and it matches the sonic identity of the title S-Class, so that's an added bonus. This beat is used throughout the song, such as in the whispered chorus, and unlike previous tracks, listeners are given the proper time to immerse ourselves in its sound and really enjoy a cohesive experience. And again, as throughout all the tracks in this album, the rapping is absolutely phenomenal in Super Bowl. So overall, Super Bowl is the most cohesive throughout its runtime amongst the hip-hop, EDM, B-side tracks in this album, and is therefore the strongest. So the second half of 5 Star has the non-hip-hop EDM tracks of the album, as typical to the structure of most Stray Kids releases, both full-length and mini albums. In my opinion, just as in other releases, these tracks feel like fillers because they aren't playing to Stray Kids' core strengths or musical motifs, so not a lot of energy is put into making the songs particularly intricate or interesting. So because of this, I'll keep my discussion of each track pretty brief to just a sentence or two. So DLC is a tropical house-esque track, and none of the elements stand out, with pretty repetitive and forgettable vocal melodies. And as a side note, I also don't think this style of music particularly fits Stray Kids' vocal timbres or styles. So following DLC is Get Lit, which is back to the more intense sound of the first half with pulsating synths and a heavy EDM bass, albeit with a pretty odd sounding sample for the beat drop. The placement of this track in the album is really weird and was quite jarring upon first listen. So next is Collision, a reasonably solid track for what it's trying to achieve, but it's majorly brought down a few notches by the MIDI trumpet line in the chorus, which to my ears sounds pretty cliche. Overall, nothing to really write home about, and it's certainly a filler track. Again, it also doesn't really make sense in the ordering of the album, and is a big abrupt change from the energy of Get Lit. So following Collision, we have FNF, which is a pop ballad with a nostalgic and expansive feel. The melody in the chorus is a bit weak compared to the rest of the track, but overall, it's a pretty pleasant and cohesive listen. I think Stray Kids' vocal production style falls short on tracks like these, especially the members that favor more stylized auto-tune. So to close off the album, we have Beautiful, a standard ballad typical to many K-pop releases. It has this weird country vibe that really caught me off guard upon first listen. Again, this is not really Stray Kids' strength or core sound, and is a track that they would add to probably pad the runtime of a full-length album, or maybe to perform as a concert in the encore section. So overall, I would definitely consider the second half to be the weaker half of this album. Overall, I definitely think that this is the weakest of Stray Kids' full-length albums. The standard was certainly quite high, as I think Stray Kids is one of the few K-pop groups who doesn't have a major drop in quality from their mini albums to their full-length albums, and I consider both their God's Menu and Thunderous projects to be amongst their best works. However, I think 5 Star has the weaknesses of their previous full-length albums without any of their real resounding strengths. Like Go Live and No Easy, 5 Star has a lot of filler B-sides in its second half, and also isn't strong or particularly intentional in terms of the ordering of the tracks and their placement in the album. In my opinion, Go Live and No Easy make up for this with consistent quality across the non-filler tracks and a few standout exceptional tracks like Tortoise in the Hair or Silent Cry. While 5 Star has reasonably consistent quality across its first half, there are no real standout amazing tracks which are the result of inspired experimentalism and slick production. Personally, this was the biggest disappointment from this release and is why I gave it the rating that I did. Stray Kids' previous 3 releases of Noeasy, Ordinary, and Maxident have all shown their clear development of sriracha as producers and a consistent pushing of boundaries. But I feel that this album is certainly a step back from pushing the group forward in terms of their sound. Ultimately, many of the tracks in the first half are similar in their purpose and energy, especially the trio of Hall of Fame, Item, and Top Line. This pitfall could perhaps have been avoided if the release was a mini album and time was focused on fewer tracks, especially given how much sriracha produces and the work rate of Stray Kids. However, I really enjoy the title track S-Class, which is by far the most important track on the album, so this era is by no means a disappointment in my eyes. So, those were my major thoughts about the 5-star album and the title track S-Class. I'm honestly really curious to hear what y'all think about this release in the comments, because I anticipate that this could be the type of release that has really polarized reactions. So I'm really curious about that. So thank you so much for listening to the end, and hide out.